Well, today I wanted to share something very near and dear to my heart. The Abbey community has many things that we commit our Dharma practice to. We really focus very much in bringing Dharma into our daily life, bringing the Buddha's core teachings of compassion and wisdom into our hearts so that we can embody it. And we do that not just amongst ourselves in community, but we really want to reach outwardly into the world to try to engage our hearts and minds with the Buddhist teachings, with the world at large. And that we have a slogan here at the Abbey that is creating peace in a chaotic world. And we have a personal commitment to trying to learn and transform our minds, to develop our good qualities, so that we can really embody that. And as we move out into the world and among each other, we're living that. And one of the things that we do as a community, and I have a personal love of, is that we engage in a lot of interfaith dialogue with some of the local faith-based communities in Spokane. And that we have His Holiness the Dalai Lama as our role model. One of his main primary focuses and commitments of this life is to have a continual dialogue and discourse with all the faith communities all over the world. There's photographs of him over the decades of him meeting all the spiritual leaders of the world. And that he values the faiths of the world, he values their place in the world, where people can connect to each other through wise and compassionate exchanges, and that the world, by and large, is better off because of that practice, because of those exchanges. Most faith traditions, at their core, irregardless of what the philosophy is, what the rituals are, what the ceremony is, the core is basically about not harming and benefiting others. In spiritual traditions, there's a great respect for life in all of its forms, and with that comes a deep sense of responsibility towards those who are the most vulnerable in our world. A fundamental belief that they deserve respect and are valued, whether they're seen as children of God, children of the mother, children of the spirit, or within the Buddhist worldview, they have been our kind mothers who have taken care of us since beginningless time. The spiritual traditions that are worth their weight of gold, and I want to qualify this, is that the spiritual traditions in our world that really take the core teachings into practice, that groups don't extract some part of that spiritual tradition and then put a spin on it from their wrong views, from their ideologies, and instead of creating, peace in a chaotic world, they sort of increase the chaos in this world. And so I want to make sure that I qualify that there are groups in this world that call themselves particular religious practitioners, and they're not engendering the deep qualities of their spiritual tradition. They're causing great harm and destruction in the world. So I want to qualify. These are the folks who are really taking it to heart, the core teachings of their spiritual traditions. So they have so many of the faith traditions have this core, deep sense of personal responsibility to those in the world that need spiritual nourishment, those that need to have advocates, those that need protection, those that need food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. And they also, many of the spiritual communities in the world, value very much their role as like earth stewards, earth ministries, that they believe that our planet is a very sacred place and that she needs to be cared for in a very, very humble, respectful way. And what becomes very apparent when you practice your faith sincerely is that prayer, study, meditation are wonderful. That's how you sort of own it. You call it your own. You take it into your life and make it real. But it's really the practice after a while really invites you to engage in the world. Faith communities have very, very powerful voices, and when they act in unison as one voice, the world really notices. So it's very important to know that deep meditation and outward activism are very complementary. They're not contradictory. So I recently attended a meeting of the Faith Action Network, which is a chapter of Faith Action Network of Spokane, which is a smaller chapter of a larger organization in Washington State called Faith Action Network. And it is an organization of about 120. They call themselves advocating faith communities who are striving for social justice and the common good through advocacy, education, and public action. They assert, and this is the part that really caught my attention on the day that I was with them in Spokane, is that they assert that our state budgets, and I'm going to say by extension, our county budgets, our federal budgets, are moral documents, that their sole purpose, if we're going to be generating income either through taxation or this, in the state of Washington, we have millions of acres of state land that they will sell the timber and be able to support education and other things, is that the revenue and the investments are used particularly for those who dwell in that state, for education, for the environment, for health, for human services, for civil rights. That this document called a budget, which sounds so dry and sort of boring, they see that as an ethical responsibility to use the hard-earned monies of the people in that state to turn it back around and to support those things and those events, those situations, those citizens of that state that need support, and to really build a harmonious, very prosperous type of infrastructure. It is not about promoting self-interest to gain power or wealth or to push ideologies at the expense of others. So once again, the political system to make sure that the representatives that are there in our state legislatures, FANS is very, very committed to making sure of tracking, are they really looking at the greatest good for Washington State? And if they're not, to really begin a discourse and bring their attention to the main basic fundamental rights and entitlements of the people in the state, and that we have to care for them as well as the environment. And that it is that the faith communities are intent on to keep reminding the legislatures that what the budget is it's a document of compassion and wisdom. It's not a document to get the bottom line squared away. It's not the way to push your agenda. It's really to take care of others. So this group called Faith Action Network of Spokane was a wonderful group to experience for the first time. These folks are really living their faith, using their body, speech, and mind. And in my mind, it's whether it's God or it's the spirit that moves you or it's bodhicitta that moves you. For many of us, part of spiritual life is to have an active engagement in the world. You have to move into the stream of activism. That spirituality is not a spectator activity. It's full participation if you really want to embody your spiritual life. And what was wonderful about this group is that each member of the circle had a particular interest, a particular passion about something, and what brought their faith and their purpose in life alive. And so there was part of the go-around was to listen to what they take care of, what they keep an eye on, what they support, what they advocate for. Some of them are involved in helping to dismantle the culture of violence in our state, where violence plays itself out in our criminal justice system, human trafficking, gender discrimination, hate crimes, gun violence, and use of deadly force. So they track, there are bills that come into the legislature that tend to track this and to try to counteract some of these, the culture of violence in our state. Others engage in increasing support for human services and reducing wealth disparity. So some of them were very passionate about making sure that the 45% of the kids in this state apply for free or reduced lunches. They sometimes, it's called breakfast after the bell. Children come to our schools in the state and they don't have any breakfast. They come to school with empty stomachs. Dealing with wage theft, those undocumented or documented workers who come into our agricultural system to make sure that they're not becoming indentured, that they're actually free to come and go and to be gainfully employed and receive their wages. Employment discrimination and all forms of poverty. Then there were other people in the group that were really focused on the environment, advocating for alternative energies. With an agricultural economics like the state of Washington, what happens sometimes is there is a concern about pesticide misuse that sometimes it's flown in a plane across large areas of agriculture, sometimes destroying hives and pollinators and polluting water and poisoning the water. So they want to make sure there's legislation to make sure that the pesticides are used properly and carefully, and there is notification when they're being applied. And then also, too, is clean energy. And another thing that's particular to the state of Washington is water rights for our First Nation communities. We have a number of water treaties in the state where the First Nation communities didn't have any input whatsoever. So they're really trying to advocate for them. And in some activist groups, it's not happened very much in my recent life, but in my past when I did some political activism, there's sometimes in these groups you spend a lot of energy just venting about being angry, about feeling hopeless. So it was amazing to see not just these people being impassioned, but really doing their homework. They knew specific issues. They knew what was coming up in the legislature. They were very savvy networkers. They had personal experiences that they were willing to share. They knew a lot about their field of interest. So they weren't just there just going, we need to do something. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. They had educated themselves and were very quite proactive. So I said to myself, these folks are fearless. I mean, you could feel the courage in the group and determined. They had incredible fortitude. Some of these folks had been doing this work in their communities for decades. And they still had joy, you know. And I kept thinking of His Holiness when he keeps saying, no matter what, never give up. Never give up on what you truly feel called to support from your very depth of your heart and from your inner spiritual wisdom, is to never give up despite the hardship, the difficulties, the challenges, the opposition. We did spend some time rejoicing at the successes of the past year. There's been some movement in the state legislature as far as bills that really take care of the constituency in the state and the environment and the wildlife. And rejoicing in their commitment to make sure that representatives are accountable for hearing their constituents, to be open to feedback, for new ideas, to be transparent. And so I was thinking about, well, this is so inspiring. I have to imagine that throughout the United States, there's got to be these type of interfaith communities. I don't think we're an isolated pocket, you know, in the middle of a large country. I think this is probably going on across the board. And right now, with just the political turbulence in our communities across the country, I think these interfaith-based communities that bring forth their hearts and their high intentions of bringing compassion and wisdom into the political process, into the civil rights process, into the environmental engagement process, I think is extremely inspiring. And I wanted to just share one last thing. Venerable Chinny just sent me an article from the New York Times. And this kind of sums things up on what's happening in faith-based communities across the country. There's this new wave now, and it has to do with the more progressive thinking of some of the faith traditions in our country that have been frustrated by Christian conservatives' focus on reversing liberal successes in legalizing abortion or same-sex marriages. Those on the religious left want to turn instead to what they see as a truly fundamental spiritual imperative, which we are totally on board as a monastic community, is caring for the poor, welcoming strangers, and protecting the earth, and maybe even changing some minds about what it means to be a believer. And that the last time that this happened was during the Vietnam War. There was this huge upswell of the clergy in this country, mostly white men at the time. Now with what's going in our country, they're saying that at the forefront there are blacks, Latinos, women, gays, and a new wave of activist Catholics inspired by Pope Francis. There's even a number of young evangelicals that are very inspired to use their faith and really activate it in a very particular way. So I wanted to just say that, you know, engage, participate to whatever level you can, and that the core practice of the Buddha's teachings is to transform our all about me minds into bodhisattva minds that are all about other. And I personally feel that there's nothing more fruitful to that endeavor is to embody at whatever level our bodhicitta is, to really be out there, to nourish our own minds, and then to support and to be in good company with like-minded people who wish to live their faith and to really embody what it means to benefit and to really take care of others. So I was really inspired by this group. I'm glad that we have a heart connection to them, and I hope to be able to reconnect with them sometime in the future and encourage everybody as well.